Okay, so now we have set up our environment, we have set up our dominoes with our textures. So the next step we're going to do is start setting keys to create movement, okay? I noticed that, you might have noticed that if you click on your polygon geometry, the texture gets distorted because it's not reading the unwrap. If that bothers you, what you can do is just right click here on with your domino selected, you know, where with the unwrap selected, just click right here and collapse all and say yes, hold yes. And that way you kind of keep it there. For the purposes of this exercise, it's not going to matter. You know, it's going to stay with your with your texture. So it doesn't matter that we deactivated the modifier. If you need it, you can always apply it again and it will reapply the same way that you did it before, and you don't have to do it again. Okay. I'm gonna do the same for this one so that it doesn't become a problem. So right click somewhere here, collapse all, oh yes, and that way we can manipulate them separately. Okay. The next thing I'm going to do is Control R to come over here, put this a little bit closer. Okay, what I want to do is put them close enough that when this one rotates, this 5-1 rotates, then 2-1 will fall down. And I'm seeing already that I have a little problem here with the placement. I'm not sure if the plane is high enough, but let's make sure it's not. I just move the plane a little bit lower, but double check on the other viewports that it doesn't go through. Yeah, it's kind of sitting on it on them. Okay. This put it a little bit there, right there. So I'm using this viewport as reference to kind of touch the floor, and that is important because we're going to be animating them turn. So it's something that you need to make sure that you allow. Do I have snapping on? No, I don't seem to have snapping on. So let me make sure that we can see. I don't know why we don't see it on the viewport, but they're not, you know, they were okay where they were. So let me undo there. Okay, so it's probably a display issue. So let's go on perspective viewport now and toggle again. That last rightmost icon there on the corner. And with Control R, I'm going to kind of rotate around, and then I'm holding the middle mouse button to kind of center them there. And I'm going to start rotating this guy, okay? So on the rotate tool over here, I am going to rotate. However, look at what happens. Notice what happens if I rotate it and make it touch this other domino. Look at what happens with the corner here. It kind of goes through the floor plane, and that doesn't look right because it looks like the floor plane is not solid, right? So it's made out of jello or foam. So you want to make sure that this floor is going to be solid and the domino is solid, that they both don't go through each other. Okay, and the same thing with this other domino. So I'm going to hit Control Z or undo over here, and I'm going to go to a side view, or a view where I can see my dominoes from the side, which is this one here on the left. Okay, perfect. Let me maximize it so that you can see them both over there. Perfect. And what I'm going to do is we're going to go to the motion tab, this one over here. No, I'm sorry, the hierarchy tab. I'm thinking of rigging it. On the hierarchy tab, we're going to move that that pivot point, right? So that it rotates, and based on this corner, think of it as a door hinge, right? The door hinge, when it rotates from a corner on the door where the hinge is set up, right? It rotates from that center part of the hinge. So what you want to do is move that rotation to over here, which is the axis where the domino will fall over to the other one. Okay, so we're going to go effect pivot only. Okay, and because we don't want to move the object, we just want to move the rotation point. And with that handle there for the move tool, we're just going to move it to the very edge over there. Okay, and let's turn off the effect pivot only. Okay, so let's test it. I'm going to go to the rotate tool now. Let me zoom out so that you can see what happens. Now when we rotate, it kind of works from that, rotates from that very corner over there in the middle, right? Versus if we were rotating before, let me show you how the other one was rotating. You see, it goes over to the ground plane. So this is the effect we want to achieve, to create a solid illusion of a solid domino that is not going to go over to this floor, and a solid floor that will not allow the domino to go down. Okay, so let me undo to put them back to where we need it to. Okay, and let's repeat changing the pivot point with this other domino. I am going to make that domino go into the right side of the screen, so that's where I'm going to put the pivot point. Okay, so go effect pivot only, and there selecting, oh nope, that let's go select the move tool over there. I'm sorry, I forgot to deactivate the rotate tool. We needed to have the move tool selected and move it to the very far edge right there. And let's turn off the effect pivot only so that we can now test the rotation. So let's go test the rotation, and perfect. This is what we want. We want them to rotate from that corner. Okay, so back to the perspective viewport, and we click on that little icon there, the toggle button, and middle mouse, or select the perspective viewport over here, and let's maximize so that way we can move over. So Control R, I'm kind of moving those so that you can see which one is which. So the first thing we're going to do is start setting keys. Okay, so I'm going to make this one hit 5-1, hit 2-1. Okay, and then 2-1 is going to start falling. Okay, that should happen fairly fast. You know, how fast or how slow depends on the forces that are applied to it, right? If it's a very fast force hitting them initially, they will, you know, according to the laws of physics as we know it, go fast. If they are hit by a slow force, then they will go kind of slower, right? And less distance too. So let's say that it will last 48 seconds, right? So let's leave it as 2 seconds. Let's go here in the time configuration button here that looks kind of like a clock and a gear, kind of steampunk. And that will open the time configuration, and the start time, let's leave it at 0. The length, let's put it to 48 and say okay. Now your timeline will reflect the keys from 0 to 48. Okay, so it's easier to now to see every key that we're going to set. So let's get started by setting the initial position on both dominoes. That way, if we move something, we can go back to it. Let's turn the set key on. There's 2 ways that you can animate. You can do automatic, right? As you go, you can move the keys. You can make the changes with your dominoes, and they get automatically registered. Or you can manually do it by putting set key, by setting your poses, and then you set the keys when you're ready for that. Okay, the beauty of this set key option is that you have more control over where and when the keys are applied. I remember as a beginning student, I will set the auto key on, and then sometimes I wouldn't know where I set a key, and it was harder to fix. Okay, so with our timeline here on frame 0, let's set a key for both. Okay, so I have domino 1 selected, and as I hit my key button, notice what we get here. We get our first initial key there, telling us that we have keys at work. And then domino 2, right? And I know because I have it here selected, set it for domino 2, and then now both have the initial key at frame 0. Okay, so let's get started with the rotating, right? Let's assume that something hit that domino on the back, maybe another domino, maybe a bouncing ball, something else, right? Hit it and then it's gonna fall into that guy. So let's say that it goes around frame 12. So let's say frame 12, it rotates enough to hit that guy. From this point of view, we can't see it well. So let's go to one of the other viewports, okay? Maybe that one that we were using before, the left. So maybe I can just do this, grab this here and move this up. That way I have more room on these two, okay? So let's say that right there on frame 12, that's where it touches that other domino. And I'm going to set a key. Boop, set a key, and now we have the initial domino kind of falling there, okay? Bloop, and it touches the second one. So let's say that by frame 24, let's go to this other one here. And for reference, and this is a personal preference, I'm going to set that initial key again on frame 12. And I can always delete this one if I wanted to, but the reason is that I want to make sure that I have a visual reference on that domino to where is it that this one will knock it down, okay? Let's say on frame 24 or so, it will be completely on the ground. So I'm rotating it and setting another key. So let's say that I've rotated there all the way to the ground. And on frame 24, I'm going to set another key, okay? So I have my initial impact, right, from domino 5-1, and then the other domino falls, but also this one at this point should keep going, right? So let's say that kind of halfway between frame 12 and 24, and I'm being very systematic here, kind of linear. Maybe frame 18, this one is kind of sliding, touching this one here. So I'm going to click on set key, and then as this one falls on 24, I'm going to make this one go all the way down, okay? And then set key. Okay, so let's see what we just did there. We set on frame 0, they're not moving, right? They're in the initial pose. Frame 12, moment of impact. Both dominoes start to move, and then they both fall. Okay, it looks good so far as an initial animation, right? You know, it looks like they're colliding. That gives the illusion that they're solid. There's a few things that we need to tweak, and I press the play button here. Let me stop it for a moment. Notice how domino 1, the one that's 5-1, touches the other domino and kind of goes through. You see right there? It kind of goes through over there. So let's start refining a little bit that. Oh, before we do that, let's add a little bit of secondary movement, okay? Before we start refining the curves. When I say secondary movement, notice how they fall and they fall flat, right? It will make sense. It will make it more interesting, perhaps, that maybe this one slides down, slides back because it doesn't have any more support. Right, since this one is kind of moving, right? Domino 2 is kind of moving forward. Maybe this one doesn't have enough support and then kind of slides back, right? The principle of action-reaction, you know, where you have one force applied in one direction and then you apply a force on the opposite direction, right? So let's apply that a little bit to that domino 1, the one that's reads 5-1. So maybe as it touches ground, instead of going in that frame of 24, instead of just staying still on this position here. I'm gonna slide that a little back, a little further back, okay? And then I'm going to rotate it, and notice that I'm here on frame 24 because I'm going to update that frame. Okay, and I'm going to set a key over there, okay? And here's what we did. They collide, and now after frame 18, that domino goes back, okay? That adds a little bit of interest. Let's take a look at it on the perspective viewport. You see it kind of slides back, and it's no longer being held by the other domino up, okay? We could, if we wanted, maybe even add a let's say rotation, a little bit of rotation. So maybe it rotates a little bit on frame 24. I wonder, okay, let's set another key there on frame 24. So let's see, it slides and it rotates a little bit. Kind of went back to the original pose. I'm wondering what happened here with my keyframes. So let me quickly check on the graph editor, and we're going to go to the graph editor next. I think I set double keys over there by accident as I was talking. Yes, I did. So let me delete this last row of keys. There you go. Sorry about that. That was not meant to be, and that's happening here too with frame 21. Probably as I moved. I will leave that one there for now. Okay. We'll go to the graph editor next. But I was noticing that it was going back to the original position, and I didn't want it to. So there was a second key over there that shouldn't have been there. So so let's go back to it. You know, what did we do? We just made a collision, goes down, slides. I'm sorry about that. Slides and then rotates a little bit. Okay. Notice that it's not exactly aligned where it was anymore. So it's giving a little bit more of a natural look to the movement, okay? That's where you add, as an animator, you add a little bit of flavor to the movement. You're your own trademark, or the character's, you know, trademark. In this case, let's shorten a little bit the time configuration. Let's go back to it and let's make it maybe 34. And the reason I'm doing this is, other than practicing how to shorten the timeline, to not having it stop all of a sudden for so long, okay? You know, I would probably extend that one to maybe a few more keys. You know, you can do that by clicking here and dragging it maybe to frame 26 to make it last a little longer. Okay, that was just a couple frames. Or you can do it on the curve editor, where we're going to be going next. Okay, now let's add a little bit of variation on this one. No, domino 2, the one that's 2 1, that reads to 1, so that it kind of goes, you know, it falls and then starts rotating a little bit up to frame 34. So on frame 34, I'm going to add a little bit of displacement in the opposite direction of the other, just to indicate opposite reaction, opposite action. And I'm going to make it slide a little bit. Okay, so in the y-axis, I'm going to move it away from this one, from the other one, to further emphasize on, okay, well, they collided, so now it's being pushed away from the original position where it was. Okay, so on frame 34, I'm going to set another key there for domino 2, and I'm going to test it. And this is what animators do all the time. They test movement, see if it works. Okay, I think there's too much rotation there, or too little displacement. So let's go to Okay, let's try to make it displace a little bit more and set the key. If that doesn't work, we can always move it back. Excuse me. And I think what's happening is that it should start moving away probably a little bit further. So let's create actually less displacement and less rotation. That's what I would say. Let's try again, and I'm going back on frame 34 and creating just a little tiny instead of a lot. So to see if it starts looking a little bit more natural. I think it needs to start shifting a little bit sooner, like that movement there on this axis, probably a little bit sooner. Because you notice that as the other one hits it, kind of stays on the same position and then bloop, starts moving. So let's go to the graph editor next and start editing keys. So let's go graph editors, curve editor, and I'm going to see which one is the one that moves in that axis. I understand it is the Y position, so the one that shifts to the right of the screen, and this is the curve that we need to see if we can delay. So this key over here is the one that I wish was a little bit further back. So if you notice over here on the bottom on frame 24, and that we're right here on frame 24, it tells you frame 24 and the value of that. Okay, so I'm going to move that a little bit further back. When probably start shifting somewhere in the middle. Let's try 17. So let's move that key back to 17. Let's see how that looks. I'm going to type 17 over here, press enter, and our key is no longer there. Now our key got moved back to 17. Now we are seeing it back here. So let's see if shifting that number back makes the movement a little bit more realistic. I think it works better. You see, as the other one hits it, notice here that it starts moving forward and gives that little movement a little bit more of a natural look, right? Remember that dominoes usually tend to have that little piece on the center, that is the classic dominoes at least, that is a metal piece that kind of makes them slide over the floor, over the table. So if these were those dominoes, it will make sense that they kind of slide. For my liking, I will probably edit this one too a little bit more, so that it does not stop until this one stops, or about. So I would probably select all these keys on these curves, and instead of 26, I would probably move it maybe 30. Let's try that, so that it doesn't stop moving all of a sudden. You know, it lasts a little bit longer. Probably even more. Maybe we can take it all the way to 34. So 34. Press enter. Now they are moving. That the movement is constant until they both stop. So let's go take a look. So yeah, now they look like they're pushing in opposite directions. So that's one of the things you can do with the graph editor, the curve editor. So the next thing I was going to show you before we do our final animation test is look at how this domino here kind of goes over the other domino. We don't want that to happen, and I'm sure it happens in several areas of the animation. Notice it happens there too. They overlap. That breaks the illusion of a solid object, right, from both of the dominoes. So on the graph editor, what we can start looking is into the rotation curve. Okay, so click on the X rotation curve, and what I'm going to do is simply start editing the the points where where that happens. So let's say here on frame 14 is kind of halfway in the midpoint where that happens. So I'm going to edit that curve. If I try to edit that curve right now, notice what happens. Not the curve, the key, right? If I try to edit the movement, notice what happens. You see, you can see on the graph, watch the movement on the domino. You can edit how fast it rotates and how slow it's gonna rotate, right? So the first thing the only thing that I see is that it's also controlling the other side of the curve. So I'm going to select that vertex and I'm gonna go tangent, break tangents. And that's gonna allow me to edit those separately. So I'm gonna edit this side and I'm gonna kind of go up like this, and I mean go down on that tangent to the point where they don't overlap anymore, and this will be a constant back and forth. Okay, so then you test the animation, you see that the domino touches the other one and it slides through, but it doesn't go through anymore, you see. So here we can do it again on this one over here. You see that it's sliding, it's going through again. So I'm gonna first, those are the two steps, break the tangents. So tangents, break tangents, so that you can manipulate them separately, right? So then I'm going to edit this tangent, kind of drag it down until I see that it goes through. There you go, it's kind of touching there. I am a little concerned because that over there doesn't look very good. So I think I dragged too much the tangent out. If you have, you know, edit the tangent and you make it too long, you might end up with something like this. So make sure you don't, you can shorten it. So if you need to shorten it a little bit, but don't make it too far out. And let's zoom in a little bit. That, let's go back to, okay, just that it's a short distance there, so I'm having a little bit of a hard time with, let's remove this. Okay, now it's better. Okay, so you're gonna keep going, you know, checking to make sure that that doesn't happen. So I guess I'll have to do it here. It looks like we might actually need to edit that key. Let's see if that's the case. Was that the one we moved back? I think that was the one we moved back. Not making sense that it's so steep. Maybe we need to change the value of the key, the actual key. So let's take a look at the key. It is not, let me see, what value does that have? It's on 21. It's past 21. I'm seeing that it kind of shift. It's 21 and 22. 21. Why is it all the way up there? Just grabbing that handle. just giving me terrific time. Okay, for some reason that is not lining up to my liking, so I'm just gonna grab that key and delete it. Okay, so there you go, 18 right here on 22 again. Might need to set up another key over there, so let's set a key over there on 21 again. And that way, yeah, deleting the key sometimes might resolve the problem. So over here on 22, notice that there's a little change there. So let's delete that tangent. Oh, we haven't broke the tangent. So let's go tangents, break tangents, and now we can manipulate it individually. Sometimes you might need to go to the other curve and work from the other side as well to make sure that the movement is a little constant. Okay, so they're touching, so that's what we wanted. So let's go back to the perspective viewport, maximize, and let's play the animation. Let's see how it looks. Play. So it looks decent, right? So we have now they're colliding, and then you're going to go over the, if you add more dominoes, you want to double check that they're not going through each other like we just did. Add or delete keys if needed, break the tangents and manipulate each tangent separately, right? That tangent is how fast or how slow the movement is going to happen. So the more linear the curve is between the two vertices there on the graph editor, the more constant the movement will be. Okay, so there you go. And now the last step, after you test it, you place your animation test. I'm gonna press G for grid to get rid of the grid so that we can make our animation test. Let's say we run it until 34, right? From 0 to 34, which seems to be okay. So we're going to let's go Tools, Preview, grab Viewport, and let's go to Create Preview Animation. On the active range, set it to be 0 to 34. Okay, so you can either select the active segment if you haven't set it up as we did, or you can do custom range to do just a little segment of what you have on your timeline. And make sure you're on the perspective viewport and create. What that will do, say okay, it will create a preview based on what you're seeing on the viewport. Okay, and we'll bring it to the software that handles either QuickTime or Media Player. In our case, the default is AVI. So that way you have it, have the movement, in real time. Keep in mind that you might have some display issues. You see that that the texture kind of goes reverse to the checker map for a moment. If that happens, just let it run a few times before you create your animation, or try a different format like QuickTime, and that might resolve the problem. Okay, so I hope that you learned a lot and that you apply these concepts to your animations.